Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Bingo Schmingo, brought to you by ThemeDaze, DAZE, a new concept in activities and music for senior communities and for seniors at large. So I'm Dan, I'm here with Susan, and we're going to talk about some of the ins and outs and some of the issues that activity directors face. And Susan, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good,
Sitting
I
here
knew
in
that.
beautiful, look at this. I'm sitting here in beautiful Vermont.
That's a fake background. I
No, it's
love it.
not. It's
Prove it.
not. No,
Can you prove it?
I can prove it.
All right, prove
Listen.
it.
Oh
No,
my gosh.
the audience needs proof. Oh my, I think what you have is one branch hanging out from that screen.
It's true. It's true. The
Beautiful.
rest of it's a fake.
Well,
What
this,
about your scenery? Is that a real plant behind you?
how do I answer a question like that? Is that a real plant? Yes, it's called a porcupine plant.
Are you a real boy?
Yeah, well, we're off to a great start, Susan. So what does a flopped activity actually look like?
Oh my gosh, a flopped activity. Firstly, yes, a flopped activity. It would be something that you spent time on and you invited residents and no one came. That would be the definition of one type of flopped activity. So you schedule something, it's on the calendar, you invite, you post it, you put it on the whiteboard, it's on the calendar, and then you get little participation. I would call that a flopped activity.
And I should point out for those who don't already know Susan, that Susan is an activity director herself. I am the music side of things, and I'm a pianist, and Susan is an activity director. And Susan was my client. I was her client, mutual clientele. So Susan really one of the best activity directors I've come across. She's got a wonderful reputation.
Thank you.
That makes sense because when I play the piano at some places, there are people in their seats ready to go. There's one place in particular that I play at. When I walk in, there are 35 to 40 people already seated
Yeah.
there. They all applaud when I come in. And, it really, it's wonderful. There are some places where you can play where I don't want to name particular places
Yeah,
because
no,
they're all good in other ways.
absolutely.
But sometimes you go into a place and there's nobody seated there.
It's
Nobody. Or
true.
one person or
It's,
two people.
it's very true. And sometimes that can be, we all make mistakes. Sometimes things don't get put on the calendar when it's been scheduled. That would be a flopped activity. And there's also times where there's not enough staff. There's so many situations that I would consider as a flopped activity. I think one of the number one things is the approach on the invite
The invite from whom? From the activities
from the
director
activity staff.
to,
Yes, to the resident. It's all in the approach. You get to know the residents, you get to know what they like, dislike. But the one thing I tried never to do was to not invite just because the last time they didn't go. Or sometimes, you know how they say, like your mother would say, you know what, Susan, if every time you're invited to do something you say no, they're going to stop inviting you.
sure.
That's something that we have to work through as activity specialists and directors, that we don't do that.
It's your job. You're
It's
getting
our
paid for
job.
that.
That's
Yeah.
right. Making sure it's on your whiteboard or your big calendar for the day. Talking about it. I always put a flyer on each of the dining tables, not for each resident, but for the big activities, I put reminders. It could even be simple like music today at 2, just so it is it's a constant flow of reminding.
I understand.
And those are ways of solving the flopped activity. So, yeah.
Very often I find that when I go to a place and there aren't too many people there, or the activity director isn't there on that day, which sometimes does happen when I show up to play the
Yeah.
piano,
Yep.
they'll say, "Okay, we're going to go get people." So
Yep.
what do you do? Actually knock on their doors?
Absolutely.
You knock
So
on their doors
we knock on
individually.
everyone's doors. I used to try to start doing that about 30 minutes before the event was happening. So I would have everything set up and I would tell my activity staff, I'm taking this corridor, you're taking this one, and let's meet in the middle. And then after that, we would then go over to our memory care unit and grab our memory care residents. So
Yeah.
obviously there's a
Yeah.
safety factor and always in bringing memory care residents out. So we always did that at the tail end of it so that there was always a staff member that was present with our memory care residents
Yeah.
to keep them safe and to ensure that there was how we place them. It's such a art. It's like you just get to know your residents. You
Yeah.
get to know where to seat them. It's kind of a dance between the activities director and your staff
Yeah.
and figuring out how you dance together and finding the strengths of your staff.
Yeah. Sometimes as a pianist, sometimes I will be told, "Oh, don't worry, people will come in as you start playing." Now, I need to tell you that there is not a musician that I have ever known that likes people to come in the middle of a performance.
I know.
They
Well,
may think it's okay, oh, it's background music, but it's not background music. It's a
right.
performance, and people are there to listen and when people come in the middle of a performance, it's very disconcerting to the artist, and it breaks their train of thought.
I know.
And it would be very appreciated if all activity directors understood that people should be there ready to go before the performance starts.
Yes, and you know what? In a perfect world, that would be the case.
We're not in
And
a perfect
this,
world.
we're not, but in this industry, I tried really hard. And typically, Dan, you remember when I worked at Valley, that a lot of times if I brought people in after the time, I would seat them in a section that wasn't in the living room. So I would love to say that we could make that become a reality all the time. We certainly try.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember when you put them in other places, like behind me.
Yeah. That
So I
was
had to
the,
sit up straight every time.
yeah, it
It's
was the
like,
only,
all right,
yeah. And
everybody sitting behind me here. Yeah.
well, you had the living room full, but I would have it at basically standing room only. There was no other spaces to put them. And
In
also
that particular facility, you're
in that
absolutely
facility,
right.
and also I knew my residents so well, and I also knew the ones that in the middle of the performance were going to want to leave. So I tried to
Oh,
always sit them in a section where I could get them out without disrupting the whole room. So sometimes, and at Valley, that living room is beautiful and it's big and but it's not big enough for 40 people.
I think activity directors should have some kind of guidelines, some list of guidelines that they can give to performers. For example, people may leave in the middle of your performance. This is
Yes,
unlike playing in a concert hall.
y-
People may
exactly.
leave for whatever reason. It doesn't mean they don't like the way you're playing,
Exactly.
or it just means that they have to attend to whatever it is they need to attend to, or they
Yep.
need to rest, or they're too exhausted. So, yeah, I get that. I get
Yep.
that all.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a fine dance, like you said,
It is a
for
fine
everything to
dance.
work out.
The other thing on the actual events themselves and getting residents there, I found, when you're you ask a question versus it's saying, would you like to join me? Or, you know what, Kathy? Dan's coming. He's going to be here in 15 minutes. I'm going to escort you right down personally myself. I tell you, when I did that and when I gave myself enough time to do that, it was so much more successful. Or I had this one resident who loved to put on lipstick and comb her hair. So if I only gave her 5 minutes to do that, she would have been flustered and upset. So I would always go to her and I'd say, okay, Linda, I'm going to be back in 15 minutes. How about you get all
Hmm.
fixed up, get your makeup on, and get your hair combed, and I'm going to meet you back here. And it was crazy how
Yeah.
the different approaches for different residents creates a successful event activity. It's
Yeah.
really an
Yeah.
art. Yeah.
It
So,
really is. What if you go to get a resident, the resident just says, no, I'm not interested?
you know what? At the end of the day, we know the residents well enough. And you know what? They have the right to say no.
Of
They
course
have the
they
right
do.
not, they have
It's
the
not a
right not.
prison.
It's 100%. I would sometimes say, oh my gosh, it's Dan or it's Art. And they may come back to me and say, you know what, Susan, I've just been really tired today. Or I had so many visitors. Or, you know what, I'm just feeling like I need to rest this afternoon. And I would question it, but I never, once that no was, nope, I'm not coming today.
But what
I'd
if
be
they
like,
always say no?
okay, so that's completely different. You know what I would do is I would say before even the question was asked or the event was given to them, I had residents that would say no every time. But I learned, oh my gosh, so Jim loves to help me. So I would say, you know what, Jim, I need a little help down in the event that's happening. I have all of these flyers, or could you bring Judy down? Something of the such. And you figure out how to gently create the environment where they want to say yes.
So
So
what's the main reason why you want them to say yes?
uh,
There's more than one reason.
there's way more than, first off, I loved being with the residents and seeing them enjoy themselves. I know that activities is really life enrichment. And the more they do, the better off they'll be. I always feel better when I get out of the house and do something and listen to music, meet friends. Always feel better. Always.
Well,
So,
sometimes they just have to be. I remember when my mother was in a memory care unit,
yep,
and she was very old, and they would try to get her for a movie or whatever it was, and she said, "No, I don't want to go." But then she would go, and she would be persuaded to go, and she'd thoroughly enjoy herself. So some
absolutely.
people say no, and they may say, "Well, I'm tired," but they might not be tired. It might
Ex-
just be an excuse.
exactly. And you have to, like I said, you do get to know your residents enough. And I could really tell if Joyce was saying no because she just wants to stay in her room, or if she was like unsure about the event, or you just start learning how to dance with your residents too.
Yeah,
And I,
yeah.
luckily for me, I was in a small kind of boutique-ish, under 100 residents facility. So I personally knew each of these residents very deeply,
Yeah.
and which was great.
I just thought of another reason why an activity director might want the residents to come to the activity. The family member who might say, "Oh, my mother isn't going to any activities," and they're the ones paying.
Exactly. That's a
What kind of
great,
activity director are you?
I'm so glad you said that. So this is where a tool comes into play. So first off, if there's different things you have to do, I always kept very detailed sheets and information on who came to events, who didn't, if they said no, reason why, were they out of the building, were they sick, were they just tired, did they have guests? I would always document the no. I would always put why. And sometimes I would just simply say, you know what, they said no. And I tried to guide them into a yes, but they said no again, and I have to respect their wishes. The other thing that I was able to do were photos, and make sure you get your photo releases.
Oh
So
my goodness.
there's photo releases in all these facilities, and we kept detailed, like
No,
a sheet
in other
that's
words, you have to get permission from every resident
that's in my
if you plan
photos.
on include. Yeah.
Yes,
But what if? But in memory care, how can you depend on what they say? Don't you need to get that permission from their family?
it's all in their files. So
I
we
see.
keep, so there's a file on each resident that has everything from medical to photo releases to doctors' notes to everything, and also their bios. And as soon as a new resident would come in, at Valley, we had what was called a new resident checklist, and each director had a portion on that checklist that we had to do, and then we would submit it to Angela, our executive director. That was one of the best tools. And part of my checklist was checking for photo releases. And as soon as I saw, are they, do they give their permission for me to photograph them, they would go on the sheet that my concierge, that my executive director got, that all of my activity staff got. So yes, and photos, their artwork. And I did get residents families that were like, my mother doesn't go to anything. And I would say, you know what, Miss Smith, come to my office. And I would sit down with that daughter of a resident and go through the documentation if they requested that. We did have yearly care plans that I would pull out all the documentation that showed how they participated. But I kept impeccable records. And yeah. And also, my staff, I had a sheet that it was like a double whammy. It was our census sheet. And every time a resident would show up for an event, they would highlight that resident. So it was like
Yeah.
this ability to keep track of what was successful and what was not. And it wasn't just about who's coming, it was about what's working in this facility. Is bingo actually successful? Actually, it was really successful.
Bingo.
What
Yeah.
was book club successful?
Yeah.
Yes, there were some things that just weren't that successful. One more point to this. Just because only 5 residents came to certain things, I never considered that not successful. So my knitting group, you know what? There were 5 women and men that would come to that event, that activity. I never considered that a fail. So it's not about the number, it's about what the 5 of those residents got out of that day
I get it.
knitting with their friends. And
You
it was
have
always,
to be so in tune with what's going on. I mean, you're not. I'm sure there are people who think that being an activity director is like being a babysitter. That's not the case. You're not
no,
just sitting with people and letting the
no,
time go by. You're engaging them. That's
absolutely.
the whole point. Well,
Exactly.
I will tell you that our podcast is sponsored by ThemeDaze, DAZE, a new concept in activities and music performance for senior residents and seniors at large. Here is a message from ThemeDaze, and we'll be back in just a moment. Hi, Dan here. We are taking senior activities and music performance to a whole new level. As a senior myself, I remember all the great songs we grew up with. We're going to perform them online for you twice monthly with audience creative input based upon a different theme each month and activities that will dazzle you to go along with that theme. The price will surprise you. We know you're going to love it, and we look forward to having you with us. We are back, and I wanted to mention to you that I have noticed that some of the staff at some of the places where I play, and I'm not privy to everything because I'm only there like once a month or twice a month, but sometimes I see staff, not usually the activity director, but staff treating people who probably were very accomplished people in their lives, treating them like little babies.
Uh,
Now, David, let's get up and walk over to who wants to be talked to that way? Don't you
you
think
know,
these intelligent people feel like they're being spoken down to when that happens?
yes.
That's
And you
the
know
thought
what?
that crossed my mind.
That's education. It's such a hard one because at the end of the day, it's education. It's about what that does. We all have to do continuing education. It's called Relias.
Yeah,
And it's definitely one thing in a Relias course that we're all mandated to do talks about that. I had some staff that I saw, do that, and I would pull out the Relias, like the course, and I would print that piece off. And I would sit down with them and I would say, here's the Relias course that you passed, and let's just refresh this. And I would explain to them what that is and what it does to someone when you're a grown adult who's very cultured and has lived a life,
right.
who has raised children. And it is simply education.
Yeah, I see.
It's what it is. And you just re educate. And that's something
Interesting.
that goes into their personnel file, and you know what? A lot of times when you do it that way, instead of like, you cannot do that, when you sit down and explain why, and here's the information, and this is what it does, you will see a vast improvement. So that's how I dealt with that.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
What else would you say are some of the issues that activity directors face on a day-to-day basis
Oh,
that they could use
gosh.
help with? I mean, what's missing?
That's a great question. I think creating a balanced calendar, understanding times in a day on when things are going to work best. And that was one of my hardest challenges with each of the communities, figuring out those times. But it's funny, it was pretty across the board. You do a morning activity, then you do a 10:30 activity, then they break for lunch. 10:30 takes them right into lunch. Then you let them break after lunch for a rest. And then by 2 o'clock, we were on it again. And then we pretty much went till dinner. And some nights I had after dinner activities, a movie, a documentary, a drive. We would take drives sometimes in the evening before it got dark and before winter hits in Vermont.
Yeah,
It's the biggest hurdle is having enough staff, and the activities directors have, for me, having enough time to build the real enriching programs, so that finding a time was my biggest challenge.
that was your biggest challenge.
Yeah, it was my biggest challenge.
Yeah, I can understand this. So much to
Yeah.
do, so much to consider.
Yep.
I sympathize with activity directors who really are well-meaning and would like to spend time with the residents,
Yes,
making the residents feel comforted, and that's a very serious issue.
it
Finding the
is.
time.
And the other
All
thing
fun.
is finding new programs, perspective of another activities director, finding out what works for other facilities and trying it. Try it. Like I used to have men's group. It was so successful at Valley Terrace where my women's group wasn't as much.
Huh.
So I changed it from a women's group to a discussion group or a
Oh, interesting.
meditation.
That's
It,
interesting.
yeah, or bridge. Well, I had a successful bridge group. Some facilities, they're like, I can't get two people to come. Where I couldn't, I was always trying to come up with two and three tables, people who were playing bridge. So yeah, it really is. And as the tables turn there and cognitive levels change, you have to change, you know. So it's a constant, as I call it, river. It's just these twists and bends and currents and day to day. And like I said on the last one, we just can't be too hard on ourselves. We have to, you know, if you're doing your best and you're going home every night and you're smiling because Miss Smith had the best day of their life, or a family member came in and they were so excited to see their father at a concert, you've done your job for the day and then
Get it.
repeat the next day.
I get it. How
Yeah,
about after you leave for the day, then they're kind of activityless. They're on their own, right?
it's true. And it's definitely why I put in some evening activities. We had some residents who were on the younger side and for whatever reason were, and if it was Parkinson's or something that put them there a little earlier than the typical. And so we would come up with ideas, or I would put cards out on the in the country kitchen and buy a tub of ice cream that they could get into while they were playing cards or put on Jeopardy in the country kitchen. You just have to figure out how to fill their days. And for the most part, these residents are going to bed early.
Well,
I mean,
how about while they're eating? I did notice that very often there's no conversation happening. There might be a table of 5 or 6 people and no one is talking to anybody. That it
that's
seems to me it would be great if there were some kind of mealtime, at least optional activities or word games or
that's
anything that they could
well,
play while
well,
they're sitting there.
I dealt with this, and how I dealt with it is I would put like a brain tease at the table, but it was for the table.
I
So
like
it
it.
wasn't like one resident was filling out their puzzle. No, it was a group table activity, that a daily dose
Yeah.
or a couple of trivia questions that was about what was going to happen the next day, or you just, and also it's when you start seeing that your residents at a certain table aren't, they're not jiving, it's management's turn to step in and maybe switch it up a little bit in a way that isn't, you don't make the resident wrong for they're not talking, but okay, it's time for us to maybe put Miss Jones there and see if that actually helps, because everybody doesn't get along, everybody doesn't like everyone else, and they have the right
Yeah.
to not talk to someone they don't find interesting. We didn't have very much of that at Valley, but we were
But
very
Valley
selective.
was more of independent or assisted
No,
living,
no,
would
and
you say?
well, no independent. We only had assisted living and memory care. Yeah.
So do the memory care people have meals with the assisted living people, or do
Most of
they
the
have
time
their
they have
own?
another wing of, yeah, they're in another wing at most facilities, and they had their own dining areas, and but always we're out at our activities. It's a staff thing. You can't bring a bunch of memory care residents into an unsecure, yeah, and not where they're not with an aide at all times.
Yeah.
So you don't ever want a resident to walk out a door.
Well, how do you handle residents, particularly probably new memory care residents who feel trapped, who feel like they're in prison because they're not allowed to get out, they can't open a door. And at one of the places where I play, it's right near the front door, and it's so sad. There are so many residents. They keep going over to the door, pushing on it, trying to open it.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
that's
fun.
that's called a redirection. So that's typical. That's very typical, especially when a resident is mobile and can get around. We call it exit seeking. And that happens. And typically it starts happening. We call it, another term is called sundowning. So exit seeking is the resident trying to get out. And then either an aide or an activities director or activity staff redirecting the resident to something that will capture their attention.
You want to spend a moment talking about what sunsetting is?
Sundowning. So redirection would be your first thing, but a lot of times in the evening, it's called sundowning. And it's when a resident gets restless and there's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just that, and I can't get into the brain of anyone, but I would imagine, there's confusion. And this is coming from an activities director.
Yeah.
I'm not clinical, but I know memory care enough. It could be a fear. I'm looking for my daughter. I'm looking for my dog. I'm looking for my child. Where's my car? There's all these things in a day that someone who has memory change is going to look for. Say, residents looking for their car. And you know what? There's ways of dealing with that question. I'll give you an example. Say, John, you know what, Susan, where's my car? Somebody stole my car. And there's two ways that I've seen it dealt with. John, you haven't had a car in 15 years. What are you talking about? No. That's
Oh,
a that's a
that's
flunk.
belittling the
Yeah,
person.
we don't bring them into our world. We go into their world.
I
So
love that.
John
Yeah.
thinks that he still has a car. You don't want to lie to John, but you want to redirect John. And I would say sometimes, you know what, John? I'm going to go figure that out for you. I'm going to go find out where your car is. Is it perfect? No. Is it more heartfelt?
More
Yes.
compassionate. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you could say, you know what, John, you know what? Your car's in the shop. There's so many different ways of dealing with it. And the only thing that I would say about the redirection, a question like that, is don't demean them and don't tell them that something doesn't exist just because it's the correct answer. It's you're taking care of a very special population of individuals who deserve compassion, care, calmness. And if John calms down because you tell him you're going to go look for his car, well, go tell him you're going to go look for his car.
You
That's at
know,
least my opinion.
particularly in a culture like ours where people don't necessarily revere the elderly as they do in other countries. They're going from one part of their life where they were not looked down, but discarded almost,
Yeah.
ignored. And then
Well,
they come into a place, and I would think some of the anxiety about being there can be dispelled just by experiencing the compassion of the
oh
staff.
my, absolutely.
Yeah,
100%. So that would be the sundowning and the redirection. And a lot of those, some of that stuff is inevitable. And then
yeah.
some of it, if we're not very careful, we can create anxiety and upset. And I don't like ever focusing on the negative, but that's reality. There's some negative, and we see it. I saw it, and very infrequently, but I did see it every once in a while. And it's also the education of the staff. It's
Yeah.
education,
Yep.
education, education, documenting, and it's all a dance. It's
Oh,
all a beautiful
absolutely.
dance.
Absolutely. We've come to the end of our time here, but some really insightful thoughts and
Yeah.
ideas, and I thank you for that. I'm sure everyone really got a lot out of what you've been talking about. Next week, we have a very special guest,
Yes, we
and
do.
I'm not going to get into it right now, but we look forward to having you with us on Bingo Schmingo, brought to you again by ThemeDaze, DAZE, a new concept in activities and music performance for senior communities and for seniors at large. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.